Welcome to the Stumbling Spirit, contemplations on the path of resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. Clinical psychologist and mindfulness advocate Chris Germer once said, quote, "A moment of self-compassion can change your entire day. A string of such moments can change the course of your life." All season long, I'm exploring the connection between compassion and resilience. Someone who knows a lot about this topic is Markus Bohlmann. Markus is a practitioner and certified teacher of the renowned research-based Mindful Self-Compassion program created by Chris Germer and his esteemed colleague, Kristin Neff. Markus is also an energy worker in the heart-based Brazilian shamanic tradition called Fogo Sagrado. Here to talk about the essence of compassion and its importance to resilience is academic and holistic practitioner Markus Bohlmann. Hello, Markus.
Hey, Fabio. Good to see you. Good to hear you.
Oh, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming on the show. So let's start with the most basic question, which is, what is compassion?
Good question, Fabio. And I think there's various answers to that. But what compassion is kindness in moments of suffering. So compassion means you basically open your heart when somebody else is suffering, not doing well, going through a difficulty in life. And then self-compassion is basically making a U-turn. You basically are there and present for yourself when you're not doing so great, when you're going through difficulties in your life, and you are being there for yourself and you are treating yourself kindly, with friendliness, as opposed to criticizing yourself and adding fuel to the fire, as they say.
So you talk about the fundamental aspect of compassion is easing or desiring to end suffering in oneself and others. So what is the opposite of compassion?
Well, I would say it would be self-hatred, self-criticism, and continuing one's suffering and not doing anything about it and just accepting that it's there, that it's normal, that it's natural, which it is. You know, we all go through difficult times and difficult moments, but there's ways to relate to this, and as you're aware that mindfulness is a relational practice, and it helps us to be with our suffering in a way that transforms it.
Compassion is inherent in all of us, in human beings, in sentient beings, in mammals. We see it in nature. Why is compassion more present in some people versus others?
Well, I think it's present in all of us, but I think it has to do with conditioning and upbringing. And some populations, they're not as kind to themselves because they've been through more suffering, based on how society is set up, culture is set up. Which doesn't mean that, they're lacking compassion, but there's just a lot of suffering to be with, So we could add like a privileged lens to this, but like it's, I don't know, I wouldn't be too general about it. Like say, okay, this population has more suffering or suffers more than the other. It's still individual,
Yeah, and I would almost say that it's really how we process that suffering, right? Because, I've seen over the years articles that show research or anecdotal points around the fact that many of the poorer countries in the world are actually happier than more prosperous countries in the world. And part of that happiness that they experience is they might not have as much money, but they have community. And what exists within that community? Compassion. And so I agree with you in the sense that it's important not to generalize. And I would even say that even in privileged communities or countries and societies where maybe there is more prosperity or money or whatever, that sometimes that is a barrier to connecting with other people because some people get caught up in the trappings of life.
Yeah, that's what came to my mind. Like isolation is everywhere, right? And then you sort of try to adhere to certain standards, and you are, as you say, entering a trap, of people pleasing, of adjusting, of, you are basically beginning to abandon yourself, and you begin to become estranged, more and more and more as you adapt and people please in order to adhere to social standards, always in this effort to belong, to be accepted. Yeah.
So you talk about this longing to belong and be accepted as one of the traps that humans get into. I wonder if you could expand upon that and maybe describe what other things can prevent us from being able to access compassion within ourselves and for others.
Well, I think and believe that this desire to belong is really fundamental to all of us. And what prevents us to access self-compassion is, for example, the critic that tells us, oh, compassion, that's this fluffy, dovey, pinkish kind of thing. That's not for you. You need to be hard in this world in order to get anything done. So we, beat ourselves up. And actually, the critic is one of the hindrances to self-compassion. And yeah, that would be one of these things that prevent us from accessing self-compassion.
You talk about the inner critic, and it's something that we all have to different degrees. So, with that being ever present in various intensities, how can we better cultivate compassion within ourselves and others?
Well, it's not wanting to get rid of the critic, which is, not possible, but it's such a wish because it hurts. The critic can hurt a lot. So it's about recognizing the voice of the critic, but not giving it that much space and beginning to cultivate a compassionate voice, which we also have, but it can be very little, like a little seed there that needs to be watered and nourished so it grows more and more. And it's about not giving in to the critic, or saying stop. And this is where fierce compassion comes in, where, we say enough, we exert like a fierce stance towards the critic within ourselves and just don't accept all that comes from the critic anymore. But it has to do with, building an awareness around the critic and when the critic shows up and when we, feed the critic, and because this is how we have grown up, in our culture. It's the critical voice that has been nourished, not so much the compassionate voice.
So, I just want to be a little bit clearer about what that inner critic is. So, what you're talking about is negative self talk. How else does it manifest itself?
Well, it's not just self-talk, but it could also be behavior. You know, it could be because the critic is the voice of shame, and the signature of shame is to hide and not to say anything and to sort of withdraw. This could also be an expression of the inner critic, of not treating ourselves that kindly.
And if we're not treating ourselves very kindly because of that negative self talk or the actions that we take, that can also manifest in how we treat others.
Yeah, exactly.
So, could we explore that a little bit more? I mean, it might seem obvious, but I just really want to get to the nitty gritty of what happens when we don't cultivate that self compassion, how it manifests within ourselves, but also what happens in our relationships with others. So, let's talk about the dynamic with others if we do not have a healthy relationship within ourselves from a compassionate stance.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying like how I treat myself is how I treat others. So if I'm not that kind to myself, I'm also not that kind to others, and the consequences are isolation. It's actually eruptioning relational bonds than cultivating them. And we become more and more isolated, which again is that signature of shame. So we're trapped in this, vicious cycle, and it's hard for us to build like genuine relationships that are not based on judgment and suspicion and paranoia.
So, how do we get to the place of, okay, so let's say I'm that person. So, I'm that person that has a really strong inner critic. I am not treating myself the best. I am also mistreating the people around me. How do I get to the point of awareness in terms of understanding that, hey, you know what, things need to change. I need to cultivate a compassionate practice?
Mhm. Well, it would be suffering. The question is like, how are you really doing today? And then noticing, oh, the critic is there. And then it always begins with acceptance. Just this is how things are at the moment. And then easing, relaxing into that acceptance. And then beginning to take little steps, bit by bit towards cultivating that compassionate voice. But it begins with noticing the critic, because if we don't notice it, we can't respond to it. So we need to notice how it operates, how it shapes our lives, how it influences our lives. And that is the first step. And then it's about like, oh, so how can I do things differently? How can I speak to myself in a friendly, supportive way? How can I not beat myself up?
Earlier, I talked about mindful self compassion and that you're a practitioner and teacher in this program, which is also in short called just MSC. Can you talk about what it is at a high level?
Well, MSC stands for Mindful Self-Compassion, and it is cultivating self-compassion, which is like it's an energy of feeling, but it's also an attitude, and it is centered on three components. One is mindfulness, like that's the awareness piece that I just talked about with the critic. It's like noticing it, because if I don't notice what's going on, I can't respond. And then the second pillar of self-compassion is connection. That sort of goes against or stands in opposite to isolation. So it's by including myself in a circle of compassion, in a circle of suffering, saying, oh, I'm not the only one, or Fabio, you're not the only one who's struggling with that critical voice and internalized negative self-talk that has its origin not even in yourself, but in others, in the culture we live in that tells us we are unworthy and so on. But, you're not the only one. There's others, they're there. And then leaning into the ease that might bring. And then the third pillar is kindness. Like, how can I be kind to myself in the moment when I recognize the critics going on again? Like, what do I need in the moment? What can I offer myself? What is available in that moment to provide some ease? Is it a deep breath? Is it just saying, stop, enough? Is it like a fierce yoga horse stand? What do I need in that moment to take good care of myself? And these are the three pillars of self-compassion, and they're basically cultivated in the program.
The second pillar that you talked about is connection, which is also called common humanity or recognizing our common humanity. This program is divided into several sections that are covered over a number of weeks. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the structure and at a high level, the different areas that you cover in the program.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's an 8-week program, and one meets about 3 hours each week, and there's a theme to each week, and it begins with theory. It begins by chatting about, so what is self-compassion, what is mindfulness, and the research, and then it begins to go more into experience, because the program is not so much about learning about self-compassion, it's about learning to cultivate the self-compassion as a skill, as a tool, as a resource. So it's a resource building program, and it talks about the critic and how to cultivate a self-compassionate voice. It talks about values, noticing what are my core values. Like, I remember I never asked myself that question until I took the program. What actually are values? What are my core values? And then have I moved away from them? Because that's a source of suffering, not being aligned with one's values. And then what little steps I can do to align myself more and more with these values, but also recognizing that I can't be in 100% alignment, right? And so the program also talks about, burnout. How can I prevent burnout? It talks about empathy, fatigue. It talks about difficult emotions. How can I be with difficult emotions rather than running away from them, avoiding them, which only makes them stronger? So how can I gently turn towards them? And yeah, it talks about, compassion for myself and others, and how I can stay true to myself while being with others and not lose myself. We mentioned the people pleasing and the adjustment and the becoming more and more inauthentic. So it's about like staying true to myself and connecting with others from that standpoint.
Connecting with yourself and connecting with others from that standpoint. So it's a program that is not only based on discussion, but it's also very much an experiential program. And so I'm wondering if maybe you can talk about the different experiences that people might expect in taking part in the MSc program.
Yeah, thank you, Fabio. So I'll begin by just adding that, there is, like, each section has a didactic component, like a teaching, a little bit of teaching, and then it goes into a practice, and then there is an exchange happening amongst participants. But it's not therapy or group therapy, because we don't go into histories. We stick to the experience we've had with that particular exercise. And this is also where common humanity or connection pops up, because we learn from others and we begin to realize, oh, we're not alone. There's others there as well. And then there's always an invitation to home practice, practicing the meditations, when difficulty arises, because the focus is on applying self-compassion. So though there is a group between 8 and 16 people, I'll say, and it's very individualistic in the sense that it's invitational and people are invited to take that with them that goes in resonance with them. So it's not about forcing yourself through an exercise if you feel, oh, no, I don't want to go there. It's not about practicing an hour every day and you feel like, oh, I have to practice. It's more about realizing, oh yeah, this one is really connecting with me, that practice or that meditation, that exercise, and I want to integrate that more into my life. So you stick with that. A metaphor would be like that all these practices are like a bunch of flowers, and each person can pick that flower or these flowers that work for them, that help them, and leave the others aside for maybe a later exploration. So there's an opportunity to engage in all of these practices and exercises, but always with the invitation, take that with you that works for you. So it's a group dynamic, but it's also very much based on the individual, because it wants to nourish that voice within you, like what is helpful for me, what is not helpful for me, to connect with that authenticity that we spoke about earlier on.
You talk about how the exercises are invitational in terms of its resonance to the individual taking part in the program. So I wonder if you could share, what are the benefits of mindful self-compassion, this program?
Well, the benefits are that there is something we can do about our suffering, and we can nourish and nurture that compassionate voice or that compassionate attitude and stance, and it's practicing that does that. So the benefit is that you have like the word that comes to my mind is toolbox now that you continue to build, and people to experience more ease and resiliency. And there's more than 8,000 research articles and studies that back that up, that people are more likely to treat themselves kindly when they go through difficult times, such as a divorce, There's countless studies on war veterans and
PTSD?
yeah, that it helps them be with their suffering, and people feel more at ease and more aligned with themselves.
I want to sort of dive a little bit deeper. So, in the program, there are opportunities for people to notice what is going on within themselves emotionally. And in understanding what emotions are coming to the surface through these exercises, they can have some insights around what might need to be looked at and explored. And a channel for this is the exercise, but it's also in doing some worksheets as well, right?
Yeah, there is a workbook that accompanies the course, so participants can read up on the teachings, do the exercises again. But again, the focus is not the intellectual part of self-compassion. It's about really practicing it, learning about it through practicing it, and then applying it to one's lives. Yeah, and it's a resource building, and it's not therapy as I said earlier on, but like it doesn't replace therapy. If people notice, oh, there's something that's there, that they can take that to a therapist and work with them on that. And many participants actually do that. They take the self-compassion program while they are in therapy, or have a therapist, and they also ask the therapist, is it a good idea for me to take the program at the time, because it can be activating. As you say, there's emotions that we hit, but at the same time, this is what I love about self-compassion, is that, or the program, is that we get the tools to be with these emotions. So yes, it's activating on the one hand, but on the other hand, I am building the resource and I'm building the tools to be with that which is activated. And since it's invitational, it's always like I'm always invited not to go to places and not to force myself through an exercise, but to listen to myself and feel into it. Like, oh, do I feel it's helpful for me now to go into that exercise or practice or not? And when the answer is no, then celebrating that as, fierce compassion, as saying, oh, no, I took good care of myself right now, and this is what actually it's about. That is self-compassion showing up in the moment, or in that moment, which is what that program wants to build and is about.
So you've been doing this for a very long time. You've been teaching for nearly 10 years. I am wondering whether you can share what are some common misconceptions that people have around mindful self-compassion?
Well, some of the common misconceptions are that this is for women only, that it's a woman's thing. It's something that makes me soft. I become a doormat. People will just walk on over me if I practice self-compassion. I won't achieve anything in my life anymore. It kills my motivation. Yeah, these are some of the misconceptions, but actually the opposite is the case. It builds resiliency. It makes you stronger. You're able to get through difficult situations with more ease. It does not turn you into a doormat, and it's definitely not just for women. It's for everyone. And there's actually more and more men taking the program, like based on my observation in my classes. Like I'm very happy to see more and more men in them.
You were talking about the three pillars of mindful self-compassion. One of them is mindfulness. So I wonder if you could talk about what is the distinction between mindfulness and mindful self-compassion?
Well, mindfulness asks the question, what am I noticing? What's here for me? What body sensations are here? What emotions are here for me? What thoughts are showing up? And self-compassion asks the question, how am I relating to all of this when it's showing up? So mindfulness asks, oh, there is a difficult emotion here, their shame is here. And then self-compassion would be, oh, so how can I relate to this in a way that is kind and understanding? Where I am supporting myself because shame is here. And of course they go together, because you need to notice what is here, be that a difficult emotion or be that the critic, because then you can respond. And then self-compassion would be the invitation to be kind to yourself because that is here, and offer yourself warmth and kindness, and that creates a sense of safety so that you can be with the difficult emotions.
You talk about a sense of safety so that you can be comfortable with those difficult emotions. Is that right?
That you feel okay to be with these difficult emotions, or you feel you can open a little bit more towards them rather than closing yourself off and avoiding the emotions and shutting them off, which is, it's a safety mechanism and it's helpful and supportive. But when we continue to do that, Chris Germer has that metaphor. He says, oh, it's like, sending these emotions to a gym, and then they work out and they come back stronger and stronger. So, and mindful self-compassion is to stop running away from these difficult emotions. But when they are here, is the question, can we open to them more and feel them more? But always, the question is always not to overwhelm yourself or enter into overwhelm if you feel safe, if it feels safe for you to do that. It's not about, again, now I need to feel my way through the emotion or to get rid of it, but it's about, can I gently, gradually lean into it and be with it, to tend and befriend rather than pushing it away. And feeling safe to do that, it's a prerequisite, I find, to lean into these difficult emotions with more ease.
You talk about tending and befriending and leaning into these difficult emotions. And one of the vehicles that is used in mindful self-compassion, borrowed from Buddhism, is loving kindness. So, can you explain what loving kindness is?
Well, loving kindness is a meditation that works with words and language. And this is one of the ways of how you can build that compassionate voice. I feel now I need to make a little loop back to the critical voice, the negative self-talk that we have internalized, but to make space for a different kind of language, kind words, supportive words. This is where loving kindness fits in. May I be safe, may I feel that I belong, like whatever words work for you. And there's exercises in the program that actually are geared towards participants finding the word or words or sentence that resonates with them most, and then to practice with that phrase. And what it does, it begins to destabilize that negative self-talk, and it begins to cultivate that compassionate voice where all of a sudden, and this is my experience with it, it's like the voice, the little voice that comes to the forefront all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, it's okay, it's okay, you can be with this, it's and this is, for me, this is when it shows that, that self-compassion is working, that the practices are working. One of my teachers said, it's like you practice and you have this, what's the word, when you go to a bank and you get like a little pig and then you throw money into it, little coins, and this is what the practice is like. So you throw in one coin after another, and then when things get hard, like it's like you have all that treasure in there, that then shows up. And this is what it's like with this, with loving kindness meditation and the self-critic, for example, where in difficult times, all of a sudden, this voice pops up. It's okay, you can be with this. I got you, I got your back. Piggy bank is the word.
That is right. It is a piggy bank. Full disclosure, I took the Mindful Self-Compassion program and you were my teacher, and it was a wonderful experience. And when you were talking about the loving kindness, I was recalling one of the exercises where we did need to say those phrases during a meditation of loving kindness. May I be loved, may I be happy, may I be at peace. And I found them to be very powerful because they in of themselves are invitations to allow that to happen in an environment where if we do have a very strong self-critic, it sort of changes the script in a way.
It does. And thanks for sharing that, Fabio. And what comes to my mind is that one experience or situation when I was so stressed, I came home from work. I had a lot of marking to do, and then it was Christmas time, and the first Christmas card was in the mail, and I opened it, and so I opened the letter, and I took out the postcard, the Christmas card, and it had peace on it in golden letters, and I remember I was like falling back on my couch with that envelope or that postcard on my chest and just like soaking in the word peace, and it felt so good. I mean, I still had a lot of marking to do, but in that moment of time, it was just like so much ease. And I'm like, yes, that's what I need. So that for me showed the power of words, you know. We don't talk so much about, you know, the power of positive words, but like, you know, when people are saying to us not so nice things, you know, and hurting us with words, you know, that language that sits there for a long time, you know. When we break a bone that heals, but, you know, words that can stay there for a long time, you know. So it is really about like cultivating that compassionate voice in us. So it is working.
To my listeners, what are your thoughts on my conversation on compassion with Markus Bohlmann? I'd love to hear from you. Just DM me on Blue Sky at thestumblingspirit.bsky.social. As you know, we're living in some really consequential times. Dark things are being revealed, coming to the surface about the powers that be. The US, as an example, has become more authoritarian and repressive against its own people. There's widespread divisiveness across the world. So, how can we cultivate compassion in an environment where what's at stake is truth and justice in the face of lies and deceit?
You find your tribe. You find the people that you love being around with. And I think this is what the self-compassion program does too, because it's unique to have such a space where you share moments of suffering. And just the recognition, oh yeah, I'm not alone with all of this. You know, there's others who feel the same way, and feeling connected to them is what I've seen again and again happening in these spaces, I say, you know. And it's particularly important for, you know, minorities, you know, to experience connection, because for them, that one pillar, the connection of common humanities, can be very tough, you know, because they've been through so much experiences of, you know, shame and ridicule, that they ask themselves, so what do I have in common with anybody else here? You know, and it's not just, you know, experience of rejection from outside the community, but also within the community. To really have these spaces is really, really valuable. And yeah, it's wonderful, I find, to connect with people who are just like-minded.
Yeah, I mean, it is important to connect with people that are like-minded for sure, and I completely agree with you. But then, the thing that I wonder is what is the bridge to connect with people that we don't necessarily resonate with?
Well, like there's again, like as I said, like, it's about connecting to yourself first, and then from the place you connect to others, but also like recognizing that you can't save the world. You know, it's about attending. I think Sharon Salzberg, also self-compassion teacher, says that attending to the 3 feet around you. You know, this is what you can do something about, and this is your starting point. And if everybody on this planet did this, we would have a different world.
Now I'm curious about learning more about you. What was your journey that brought you to practice and teach mindful self-compassion?
Well, I was going through a time of suffering, like anxiety and depression. And then, you know, somebody said, oh, why don't you try out mindfulness? I'm like, what is this? I have no idea. And then I was sent to a bookshop that had like flyers there. I think it was in downtown Toronto. And then I stumbled across an MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction course. And I took that and I just found it so transformational. I mean, I remember walking home. It was in the evening, of course, and I was just at peace. I was just at peace. Everything was so peaceful. Like to somebody who experiences anxiety, this is a, you know, a very welcome, experience. And I remember being in my living room and looking outside the window, and there was the skyline of Toronto, and it was at night, and I was just like celebrating and just really soaking in that feeling of being at ease. And that's when I decided to continue. And after MBSR, I took MSc and MBCT and all those courses, and then soon went into teacher training. And what comes to my mind now, Fabio, if I may add something, is the fear self-compassion, because the self-compassion program work started out with tender self-compassion. It's that soothing, comforting, nourishing aspect of self-compassion or element of self-compassion. But there's also the fear self-compassion, like the setting boundaries and saying no, which we spoke about a little bit when it came to the inner critic, but also what you just mentioned about the systemic injustices, standing up and saying no and setting boundaries, and this is not mine, this is also part of self-compassion. It has that fierce element, which is, relatively new, that came into the self-compassion program a couple of years ago, but now there is a whole advanced program on fierce self-compassion. So I just want to throw that in there as well, because we have the two sides of self-compassion, the tender side, the nourishing, nurturing side, but then also the fierce side, the standing up for yourself.
I'm really glad you mentioned about the fierce, mindful self-compassion, because I find that the mindfulness world, where yes, it's important to be present, yes, it's important to notice what's going on within our body, yes, it's important to be grounded and help our own wellness or tend to our needs, like the self-care aspect of mindfulness, which is really important. And then I have also noticed that there are times where I don't always hear voices within the mindfulness community talking about the fierce mindfulness or the fierce mindful self-compassion or the fierce compassion aspects of mindfulness, where it's really about engagement, it's about advocacy, it's about standing up for what's right in the world. So I'm really, really glad that you brought that up.
And we need both, we need tender and fierce, because the activists that are fighting all the time, how are they doing when they come home? They need tender self-compassion to be with all the activism, which what I've heard is not very much celebrated in these activist circles, because it's always about let's fight, 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 But how are you doing when you come home from fighting? Then you need tender self-compassion.
You're also a practitioner of a Brazilian shamanic energy tradition called Fogo Sagrado, which translated means sacred flame or sacred fire. Can you explain what this is about?
Yeah, well, that's it's energy work from Brazil, as you just said, and has its roots in the indigenous tribes. And so what it does, it's an energy cleansing practice. It's also builds awareness, and it's about gaining insights into the situations that you are experiencing right now, but it's using intuition as a tool, as a practice, as a way in. It begins by you read somebody's energy field, and this is where most people are very amazed, because things show up that the person who's doing the reading just cannot know. And things show themselves, and the challenges you experience in life, they show up there, and then you can sort of work on them by basically taking on the energy bodies. That's a term that Fogo Sagrado uses, which are emotions, thoughts, beliefs that are connected to the challenge that you are undergoing right now. And you basically bring this imbalance into a balance. What it does is that you don't have to go through these emotions like in therapy or in mindfulness, self-compassion, like you're the ones who are going through all these emotions. In the session, it's done for you. Like the Fogo Sagrado therapist takes on these energies, bodies, and expresses them for you verbally. So it's basically you watch your own inner life through that other person. And then Fogo Sagrado, it has a connection to the universe, the divine, the source, or whatever you want to name it. And you basically release everything and you receive a new energy, transformed energy, and also a message. And then after that, you can go and into your life, and you then need mindfulness to attend to what's changing, what people am I encountering, what's happening with the situation, the challenge that I have experienced or am I experiencing. And the premise is to also strengthen that person so that they can go back into life, into the situation that they're experiencing, also more resourced, more clear, or they have gained clarity because insight showed up through the session. So it's something that is very helpful because it looks behind these energies and looks at what is driving all of this. At the same time, it provides a cleansing of it. And as I said, like, you don't have to go through this because it's being done for you, which doesn't mean we're getting rid of emotions or never experience emotions again, but it's about you then being able to be with fear with more ease, for example. And I think this is where the connection is to mindfulness and self-compassion, because both are, like Fogo Sagrado and mindful self-compassion, they're both very heart-centered. And it's about becoming aware, which is what mindfulness is about. So I think this is where the intersection lies.
I'm glad that you brought up the connection between Fogo Sagrado and mindfulness and mindful self-compassion. I think that is very important. I am reflecting on something that you said, which is not only is Fogo Sagrado energy medicine, but it's also a practice where the practitioner mirrors what the patient is experiencing. So, in working with the client as a mirror, it doesn't absolve them of doing the work. In fact, I would find that to be a little bit unnerving, to be honest with you. And so when the practitioner's mirroring what it is, what energies need to be worked with within my body, and reflecting that back to me, what is your experience in terms of what a client goes through when they get that feedback?
They're amazed because things show up that the rational mind can't make up. There's connections that show themselves, that reveal themselves, and they get insights into, oh yeah, this is what it's about. So it builds and expands awareness and consciousness around that. And then the energies that are connected to that are being transformed. But that, as you say, it doesn't mean that I'll never ever experience shame again. That doesn't work. But it's about gaining insight into, oh yeah, this is what's behind the issue, the situation I'm experiencing. This is what I'm invited to learn, to look at, and it helps me move forward with my life, But maybe I'm then again experiencing shame connected to that situation or in the situation that I'm in, but I'm able to be with it with more ease, But again, it's very individualistic, like in terms of what the person is experiencing afterwards. But there is, generally speaking, a sense of ease with it because, these energies that have been in conflict with each other are being cleansed and brought into balance.
Do you teach Fogo Sagrado?
Yeah. So I teach people how to do sessions for others, but also for themselves.
So there might be listeners that want to cultivate greater compassion, but might not necessarily be interested in pursuing mindful self-compassion or Fogo Sagrado. What practical everyday things can people do to build their capacity for compassion?
It's about asking, what can I do right now that supports me? How can I be there for myself right now? And that could be very little things, such as, oh, I need a walk right now. I need to call somebody. I want to listen to my favorite song. I need to watch my favorite movie. I need to take a deep breath. I need to open my window. And then the invitation would be to do this with awareness and see what that does for you. But it's that question, what do I need? How can I be here for myself right now? How can I support myself right now? Because things are hard, because things are difficult for me, because this is so right now.
Things are hard and difficult for many people right now, just given everything that's going on in the world. So I'm wondering if you could offer just your insights on where you see humanity moving, the evolution of our species when it comes to compassion.
That's a huge question, Fabio. Where do I see mankind moving in terms of self-compassion? Well, the numbers of people taking the program are growing. That's what I know. I mean, I certainly hope for more self-compassion. But when we look at the world, like the opposite is happening, right? There's wars going on, and yeah, it's hard to believe that or wrap your mind around it. But it's again, you need to ask yourself, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? What can I do? I think it comes back to the individual, and then ask yourself, what is it that you need to fare in this world?
What does resilience mean to you?
Resilience to me means bouncing back with more ease. Like when difficulty comes, it's can I catch myself and be there for myself and support myself because difficulty is there, rather than feeling sorry for myself or going into self-pity or drowning into these difficult emotions and not finding a way.
So, we've been talking about compassion throughout this entire conversation. And I mentioned in my introduction how this season, the theme is exploring the connection between compassion and resilience. So, I'm wondering whether you could offer your thoughts on that.
Well, some self-compassion is a way to build resiliency, and because you're like, mindfulness, you notice how you're feeling, how you're doing, and then you can respond to it. And you can respond to it through kindness and friendliness towards yourself. That's the self-compassion element. And this is what is building the resiliency. You are training your prefrontal cortex, so when things come at you and hit that fan, you can notice that quickly, or like, rather than running in your limbic system, you come back online with your prefrontal cortex and, you catch yourself, you hold yourself, you are there for yourself through this difficult moment, through the difficult time, with kindness, obviously, rather than, self-criticism.
There for ourselves, but also there for others as well.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
So we talked about some of the practices that you partake in, obviously mindfulness, mindful self-compassion, Fogo Sagrado. I wonder if there's anything else that you want to share about your practices of resilience that you cultivate within your life.
Well, the practices that I cultivate in my life is self-compassion, and listening to what I need. And, it's integrating self-compassion into my daily life. As I said earlier on, it's like, okay, what do I need right now? Like, how can I be there for myself? How can I support myself? How can I do something that is, nurturing, nourishing? And of course, life provides many opportunities to practice and to learn, be that with family or at work or with a neighbor. Every day we get an opportunity to practice. But for me, it's the little things, and also giving myself permission to go for a walk and noticing where I find, arguments that, work against it. Oh, no, you can't do this now. Like, there's other things that you need to do. And like, no, no, no. I'll go for a walk now, and it can be a short walk, and then I can get back to things. And the practices themselves, in terms of which practices, they vary. It can be loving kindness, can be a compassionate friend, it can be soften, soothe, and allow, being with difficult emotions, just whatever I need in the moment and what feels right to me.
You talked about earlier how you found yourself in a state of anxiety and depression, and how mindfulness was a channel, a vehicle for you to manage through that and cultivate more wellness in your life. And that led you to mindful self-compassion and Fogo Sagrado. I am wondering whether you can talk about the benefits that all of these practices have provided to you.
They've given me more clarity, more authenticity, and being able to tune into my needs and what I need, and also the courage to express these needs. And it's a journey that continues, I still don't like having difficult conversations, and I'm accepting that as that's my challenge. So, supporting myself. And then when I see, okay, now I'm going to address this topic with someone, and then, doing that and being there for myself through it. And when I fail, then I fail. Then I pack up my, tender self-compassion. I'm there with, these feelings that come along with failure, Yeah, but I've seen it really change. And also I want to say that, it doesn't mean that I'm free from anxiety or something like that. No, anxiety still shows up, but it doesn't overwhelm me or overrun me, or it doesn't run my life. I'm able to notice, oh, I'm anxious, there's anxiety there, and then where does it show up in my body? Oh, there it is. And then can I be with this? Can I breathe through this, knowing that this is just a wave, that it comes and then also goes again, and then inviting friendliness, maybe a deep breath, or breathing deeply, inviting kindness, placing a hand on my chest or somewhere on my body, or embracing myself. This is the self-compassion piece. Because anxiety is here, or I, feel anxiety at that moment. I think, and this is what I feel how resiliency shows up for myself. It's not about getting rid of emotions. I think that's not working, but it's about how can I relate to them? How can I relate to myself because they are here, and being with these waves. And, some days it works really well, and other days it doesn't. The waves are still crushing in, and then it's like, oh, wow, what do I need now? Because there's overwhelm. What can I do? What do I need in order to, soothe myself, support myself, because overwhelm is here, and to get out of overwhelm, And maybe the answer is lying on my bed and hiding myself under my pillows and blankets. And so that varies. And I think, this is the humanity piece.
How can people reach you if they want to contact you?
Oh, they can reach me through my website, markusbohlmann.com, or send me an email, markuspjbohlmann@gmail.com, or Google me and find me this way.
Markus Bohlmann is a practitioner and teacher of mindful self-compassion and Fogo Sagrado. Thank you so much, Markus, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your practices and your insights about how we can cultivate greater compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. This is Fabio da Silva Fernandez. Join me again for another episode of transformative stories and beneficial practices to guide you on your wellness journey. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Blue Sky at thestumblingspirit.bsky.social. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.